I will also say it's a video first strategy. And as we talked about how TikTok and video seems to be taking over social, you probably need to reorient your content around a stronger video strategy. So it seems like that's a big part of the impetus behind Pinterest TV.
Hey gang, it's Monday, March 14th. Welcome to a brand new week. Andrew and listeners, welcome to the Behind the Numbers Daily and eMarketer podcast made possible by Mountain. I'm Marcus, and today I'm joined by one of our principal analysts covering retail and e-commerce. It's Andrew Lipsman.
Hey, Marcus.
Hey, fella. Thanks for hanging out. Today's fact: the cornea is the only part of a human body that has no blood supply. It gets oxygen directly through the air. The cornea is the fastest healing tissue in the human body. This is the fastest. Thus, most corneal abrasions will heal within 24 to 36 hours. So, Andrew, I don't know if you know this. As I read this fact, I was like, I am Wolverine. So he's got his, for people who haven't watched X-Men, the hell are you doing? But he's the one with special powers. One of his special powers is the ability to regenerate damaged tissue rapidly. And for some reason, I assumed that I have similar abilities. Is that too much of a leap?
So your eye is Wolverine, basically.
Yeah, it's fair. Yeah. A tiny part of my... Well, it's not as cool when you say it like that. Forget I ever mentioned it. It doesn't matter. I'm not Wolverine.
I'm just glad I've never had to have my body regenerate that tissue. I live in fear of getting a cornea scratch. It does not look or sound fun.
Yeah, it's a miracle I don't spend my entire life with swimming goggles on for that very fear. Anyway, today's real topic, lots of things Pinterest. Andrew, before today's show, I want to remind folks about one of our other Behind the Numbers shows, Reimagining Retail, our bi-weekly show that drops every Wednesday, including this Wednesday. One of the hosts of that show is our very own Andrew Lipsman, the voice you just heard a second ago. On that show, you can hear our retail specialists like Andrew and others interview industry experts, go on in-person store walkthroughs, they rank stuff, and more. So that episode is going to be dropping this Wednesday. Actually, I'm going to be on that show as a guest. So you'll hear me and Andrew talking this Wednesday. I'm not normally on that one. So it's your one escape from my voice, but not this Wednesday. Sorry about that.
Tell them what we're talking about.
So we're talking Amazon Fresh, right? And this was your idea because we did a store visit to Amazon Go Store a few years ago and you wanted to recreate that experience, but with the Amazon Fresh experience.
Absolutely. I hadn't checked out the store yet, and I wanted to go to the store, which is actually close to me, that uses the Just Walk Out technology. So pretty interesting experience, and I'm excited to share more.
Perfect. And then the second segment, I'm going to leave the show and let you talk to who you got.
Todd Hassenfeld from Colgate-Palmolive, and he is an expert in CPG, e-commerce, and retail media. So we're going to talk about all of that in the context of Amazon Fresh.
Perfect. That's this Wednesday and every other Wednesday going forward. Anyway, Andrew, we're talking about everything Pinterest. We're going to talk about how they did in Q4, how they closed out the year. We'll talk about Pinterest TV, relatively new initiative they've got going on. A couple of other news items around the company as well. Let's start with their earnings, Q4 earnings. Q4 revenue grew 20% year on year to $847 million. That's number one. Number two, global monthly active users went the other direction, falling 6% year on year to 431 million. So again, Q4 revenue grew 20% to $847 million. And then going in the other direction was global monthly active users falling 6% year on year to 431 million. Andrew, what stood out to you the most with regards to Pinterest's Q4 figures and why?
Yeah, well, so at a high level, it was seen as a really positive earnings report. The revenue growth was strong. It beat expectations. I think there was also a lot of apprehension going into the earnings, not for Pinterest specifically, but really for that whole set of social media advertisers. In the wake of Apple's iOS changes, we had already seen Facebook have a really tough earnings report. So there was apprehension around Snap and Pinterest as well. And so Pinterest really overperformed in that regard. And it's due to the fact that they are continuing to monetize their users. Average revenue per user keeps going up. As you mentioned, continuing to see a slide in overall users. But the users that they have, they are doing a better job of monetizing. And they're also starting to ramp that international ad business, which has been slower to ramp. There's more internationalization efforts, but it's where the majority of their audience is. So that still represents a big opportunity for that business to continue growing.
And that's internationally, right?
Internationally, yes. But the US declines in users, I think, was even more pronounced than it was internationally.
Okay. So how concerned are you about these user figures? Because on the one hand, you've got Pinterest, who's joint third most US users of any social media platform, joint third behind only Facebook and Instagram. So that's in America. And they're tied with TikTok and Snapchat at around 90 million users. That's nearly twice as many as sixth place Twitter. So that's pretty good going for Pinterest in the US at least. These are forecasts from last year. So they're not hot off the press, but they're relatively recent. On the other hand, you've got these user numbers which show they're going in the wrong direction. Where do you land?
Yeah, so there's a couple things going on, and I would say that there's one piece of the decline that I tend to think is not a very big deal. And then there is another piece that is a bit more concerning. So the first piece, and they talked about this on their earnings call, is basically that they're losing some traffic from Google due to some algorithm changes.
Okay.
If you think about Google searches, specifically image searches, there's always been a lot of discussion that it's like all Pinterest images. And so a lot of traffic gets driven to Pinterest through a Google image search historically. That tends to be kind of lighter traffic. It may not be your engaged users. It may not really be people who use Pinterest much at all, but it is going to register as a monthly active user, I think, in most cases.
True.
So if you're losing some of that light traffic, I would say not that big of a deal in terms of driving the business. At the same time that that's happening, though, there's also and I've seen some third-party research data from ComScore and others that shows that engagement numbers are also declining. So people are spending less time overall there. And it's not just coming down off of those pandemic highs. It's lower than it was by a decent amount from before the pandemic. So to me, that's a big question mark. Why are people spending less time engaging on the site? And I need to do more to understand exactly what's going on. But I think the simplest explanation for at least a piece of that might be TikTok. I mean, TikTok is this behemoth now that's taking up so much engagement in that social media space that is it starting to carve out slices of engagement from all the other networks, and maybe Pinterest is taking a bit of a hit there. Yeah. So I will say that that piece of it is a little bit concerning because it does constrain your ability to continue monetizing if you can't start to regain some of that lost engagement.
Yeah, the time's got to come from somewhere. I always consider, this is probably a little bit generous, but I always consider Netflix this podcast's biggest competitor, or, Instagram or TikTok or hanging out with friends, basically any activity that takes time away from listening to this show. The same way Netflix considers sleep its biggest competitor. That time's got to come from somewhere. So I think that makes sense. In terms of those numbers, though, that's where they stand today. Pinterest in third place in the US in terms of total users. But fast forwarding 4 years, we expect Pinterest total user numbers in the US to fall behind TikTok. They're going to increase, but they'll be slightly behind TikTok when it's all said and done, 2025. But they'll still be slightly ahead of Snapchat. So they're still going to be in a solid fourth place in terms of users. Andrew, there's a few more pieces of news coming out around the time of the earnings. You mentioned some major departures of executives. How big of a deal is this?
Yeah. So anytime you're trying to read the tea leaves here and understand what's going on behind the scenes. So I don't know and don't want to speculate too much, but anytime you see that, you sort of sit up and take notice and say, are they leaving because they're seeing something that's moving in the wrong direction? So that would be my open question. And given that we're seeing some of the slide in engagement, and remember, engagement and user declines precede revenue declines typically.
Yep.
So that's why you may not feel that decline in revenue right away, but as you get out several quarters, if you don't reverse those engagement declines, something like that certainly could happen. So I think that's kind of the open question that I would have looking forward.
Okay. CNBC reported last October that PayPal was in late stage talks apparently to buy Pinterest for over $40 billion, 40. Any thoughts on that deal which never happened, or the idea of Pinterest getting snapped up by someone else? Would you anticipate that happening this year, next year at all?
There's been a lot more discussion, especially with the desire to create a super app. You have a lot of sort of transaction companies that need a media company partner. So Pinterest, I think, is a natural fit, especially as their stock prices come down. They're maybe a more attractive acquisition target. And then those are also things maybe that can lead to executive departures if they are looking at what might be ahead. Again, we don't really know, but this is all the kind of swirl around the company. And I do think it is at kind of an interesting inflection point at this moment in time.
Let's move to Pinterest TV. So Pinterest hops on the live shopping trend with Pinterest TV, writes Emma Roth of The Verge. Last November, Pinterest debuted its shoppable live series airing Monday to Friday at 6 p.m. p.m. Eastern on iOS and Android, with each episode featuring a creator from the platform, from Pinterest, covering different topics from fashion, beauty, food, and more. On Fridays, the episodes turn into a QVC-style shopping show, Miss Roth Notes, where viewers can buy exclusive products from different brands like Patagonia, Crown Affair, Allbirds, etc. During the show, folks can ask questions in the chat and interact with hosts. Every episode is recorded and available to watch via the TV icon in the top left corner of the Pinterest app. Andrew, your thoughts on this Pinterest TV initiative?
In general, I would say I am not overly optimistic on the live stream shopping trend. I think it is somewhat overhyped. That said, I actually really like Pinterest version of it. I think in terms of how meaningful it can be to Pinterest as a company, there's a nice natural fit there. I think of this as maybe a next generation home shopping network, which, by the way, that's a really good business for those companies as a slice of the retail market. If I think about where that would fit in the digital space, Pinterest is maybe the most natural fit for something like that. And building a strategy around creators, I think, could potentially work. I will also say it's a video first strategy. And as we talked about how TikTok in video seems to be taking over social, you probably need to reorient your content around a stronger video strategy. So it seems like that's a big part of the impetus behind Pinterest TV.
So there was one stat, this is from an Inc. article by Rebecca Dzinski. She pointed to a study by customer experience software company Amplify, which found that social commerce has serious earning potential for brands and retailers, but less than 30% of businesses that sell directly on social media thoroughly engage customers while doing so. And this idea of live stream shopping, you were just saying, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to misquote you, but you were saying that you're a little bit more kind of lukewarm on the idea of this blowing up. That was correct?
Yeah, everyone's getting into the game, and I think everyone's chasing China.
Right.
And I think that's what's overly optimistic. But there are implementations of this that I do think will work and will move the needle. And for maybe a smaller platform like Pinterest, it can move the needle more for their business.
Okay, because Sky Canavis, who's one of the analysts on your desk, the retail and e-commerce desk here at Insider Intelligence, she was talking about live stream shopping, I think, in an episode last week. And the big thing she was saying is you need to incentivize people to tune in. You need to engage folks. And I'm not a big live stream shopper, I'll admit that. But I couldn't quite see the appeal, at least here in the US. So I've always been a little bit more hesitant as to how big of a deal this is going to be. Obviously, you've got total retail, you shrink down to the online portion, and then you shrink down even further to the live stream portion. So it's interesting to hear you say that you're a little bit more hesitant than some folks who think this is going to be the next big thing. Do you think it's going to be the next big thing? It's just we're a little ways from that, or are you a little bit more cautious on the whole thing, live stream shopping?
I think China is very unique in a lot of ways, and that any expectation that we will ever get to where China is with live stream shopping is misguided. It will get bigger. You'll see some strong and healthy growth rates. So I'm not saying that brands should invest, but it's also harder to. As I totally agree with Sky's point. Audience development is a real challenge. You got to bring the audience. It's a new skill, and it's not scalable. Most brands, a lot of brands, the long tail, they just want to, enter into a platform, buy some ads on Facebook, Google, whatever other platforms are easy to do, and leave it there. They can't get into developing content and paying spokespeople and all the other stuff that goes along with a real effective live streaming strategy. For brands that can invest those resources and do it well, I think it can work and move the needle, but it's not going to work for most.
So thinking about US social commerce buyers, Insider Intelligence analyst Nina Getson recently pointed out that behind Facebook and Instagram, Pinterest is the third most popular platform for US social commerce buyers. The third most popular platform for US social commerce buyers. We expect 15 million Pinterest users, 15 million, to make at least one purchase on the platform this year. That translates to about 17% of Pinterest users. So nearly 1 in 5 Pinterest users going to buy something on the platform this year. Do you read that, Andrew, that figure, the third place figure, the 15 million figure, the 17% of Pinterest users figure? Do you read this as everything, something, or not much?
Something. So let me slightly qualify the definition there, because Pinterest right now does not have an on-site checkout. So we define a social commerce transaction as either on-site checkout or clicking through directly to the retailer in order to check out. So Pinterest right now has been serving up their traffic to retailers. And they actually went away from an on-site checkout experience a couple of years ago. Now they're bringing it back because they and every other social platform recognize that they need that transaction data for the purposes of, having good first party data on commerce, which ultimately will help fuel their ad businesses.
Why did they go away from it? Just too difficult to figure out.
At the time they went away from it, it wasn't really happening. Consumers weren't accustomed to it. I think that Facebook and Instagram helped popularize it. And then also, I think they just realized that consumers like to often go deeper into the experience. You don't have the ability within the platform always to check out different sizes, colors, go, through the more complete funnel of the shopping process. So, But that said, some transactions may be able to serve up and lead to an immediate transaction on site. So they realize that the future means you have to have that option, and they're going back to it.
All right. That's it for the lead. Time now for the halftime report. Andrew, what's your takeaway from the first half?
My takeaway is Pinterest is at an inflection point. They have a lot of different positive trends in front of them, but they also have a few concerning trends and then the potential for acquisition. So it's going to be very interesting over the next couple of quarters to see what shakes out.
All right. Time for In Other News, but first a quick word from our sponsor, Mountain. If you could combine the precision targeting of digital advertising with the impact of television commercials, you would have an incredibly effective ad channel. And that's exactly what Mountain Performance TV does. Their connected TV software platform allows advertisers to reach their ideal audiences and drive more visits, conversions, and revenue, all from a single intuitive solution that's optimized to deliver performance. Visit mountain.com to learn more. Folks, we are back today in other news. We check in with Target to see how they're getting on, and Amazon launches a new app called AMP. Story 1, comparable sales from stores or digital channels operating for at least 12 months grew 9% year on year in the first quarter, ending at the end of January. Digital sales increased just over 9%. For the full year, Target's revenue hit $106 billion versus the $77 billion for the year ending February 1st, 2020, before the pandemic upended the global economy and consumer buying patterns, notes Sarah Nassauer and Charity L. Scott of the Wall Street Journal. But Andrew, the most important numbers from Target's most recent quarterly earnings were blank.
95% is the most important number, and that is the percentage of their sales, actually greater than 95%, that were fulfilled from the store. So they have over 20% of their sales coming from e-commerce today, but the vast majority of that is stuff that's fulfilled in store because of the popularity of their click and collect and particularly curbside pickup offering.
Story 2, Amazon just launched a new mobile app called AMP, which lets folks create live radio shows where they can act as a DJ by taking callers and playing tracks from its catalog of tens of millions of licensed songs, writes Sarah Perez of TechCrunch. Creators can also pre-plan and schedule their shows, tell listeners about upcoming ones, and more. AMP also has a slate of upcoming shows, including one from Nicki Minaj. This is Amazon's foray into the new format of live social audio that Clubhouse started and other players piled into, from Twitter Spaces to Facebook's live audio rooms to Spotify's Green Room, etc. The new AMP app is available in a limited US beta. Andrew, the biggest takeaway from this news story is blank.
I'm going to jump ahead here and then I'll unpack it a little bit. The biggest takeaway is that audio is a really big part of Amazon's advertising strategy. Now, let me walk it back a little bit. So Amazon Music, it's a commodity service alongside Spotify and Apple Music, right? They all have access to basically the same catalog, and they've all needed to try and differentiate from each other. It's why Spotify has Joe Rogan exclusives and things of that nature. This, to me, is Amazon's chance to differentiate. But I think audio is a really big, important strategy. They always, when they're talking about the importance of streaming video ads as part of their ads business, they always talk about streaming audio in the same breath. Alexa is obviously very important strategically to them as well. So I think all these pieces fit together there. I would just say everybody should take a look at what Amazon's doing on audio, because there's really, I think, a key strategy behind it.
So it's the only live audio platform to focus on music versus conversation. So it's an interesting differentiator there. But also, Andrew, I was reading this story. You could have swapped out Amazon for Spotify. How long until Spotify launches its own version of folks creating live radio shows? It's a miracle that they not missed this, but haven't released something before Amazon, it seems.
It's all slightly different flavors of the same playbook, because music is a commodity. They have to find a way to differentiate.
Yeah. All right, that's all we've got time for this episode. Andrew, thanks for hanging out as always.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks to Victoria. She edits the show. Thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you tomorrow, hopefully, for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Mountain.